Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm the chair of the Friends of Belsize committee. The library is a purpose-built Grade 2 listed building in Belsize Park, and it's been managed by the Winch, a local charity for disadvantaged children, since Camden Council relinquished control of the library in 2012. Who've been going in one form or another for around 40 years by putting on monthly talks. These were previously held in the library, but been
there's nothing I can do.
Disappearing
now for over a year. We hope we will be able to return to the library physically for attendance at the Zoom sessions, but as the library has no regular statutory funding or donation, and if it's so inclined, to make found on the library section of the Winch's website, and I've put the link in the chat box. So if you look at the chat box, you'll be able to find a link you can click on, and that will take you to the donation site, particularly specific for the library. I'm delighted to welcome tonight's speaker, Pat Saiman, who is a local resident, born in post-war Paris. Following a life-threatening event, he undertook a voyage of discovery into his past and colourful family background, as described in his book, The Missing Baluster, the cover of which you can see there. His daughter, Natalie, has kindly agreed to introduce her father formally. He will then speak briefly about his book, and Natalie will ask him some questions and chair the question and answer session. I shall shortly hand over to Natalie, but before doing so, just a few housekeeping rules. One, you should all be muted by default. If you're not muted, could you make sure that you mute?
That's you, Anthony.
I press that, lines go through it. That's muted. You are muted now. No, quite wrong.
Screen if we have it on speaker view.
We have lost quite a few people there.
Right. I'm going to ask Natalie to introduce her father. So over to you, Natalie.
Thank you very much, Anthony. So anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Natalie Jones. I'm Pat's daughter. So I wanted to introduce him today. Thank you everybody for coming. He'll be speaking for next few minutes about the Missing Baluster, and then we'd just like to have a questions and answers session. So I'll be looking after some of the questions. So if people are comfortable either writing in the chat function, I'll keep an eye on that and then ask on your behalf. Or if you are confident and want to unmute and then speak, then that's absolutely fine as well. Please don't feel obliged to ask questions. I've got a long list of ones that people have sent me in advance. So if there aren't any, then I can just ask as we go along. But before I pass over to my father, a couple of reviews that we've had from the book. The first one, moving and deeply moving observation of resilience and mettle. It's ultimately an uplifting and inspiring take of triumph over adversity. It made me laugh and cry. I even missed a day's work as I could not put it down. And I think these really show us a little bit about how you feel when you read this book. It really is quite incredible. So I'll hand over to my father just now, and I'll be back to take your questions and answers afterwards.
Well, thank you, first of all, Anthony and Natalie. And before I start, I believe, Anthony, you're organizing the recording of it, because I can sense that quite a lot of my French compatriots, including my sisters, have got major difficulties in coordinating Zoom and time. So we'll start with that. The Missing Baluster was officially launched on May the 28th, after about 2.5 years of written notes and about 6 months of collaboration with James Steen, who has actually co-written several books. The Missing Baluster actually started by being just an autobiography of my youth, mainly in France, just for my children, and possibly for my grandchildren when they are older. You could say that I became an eyewitness of a period after the war of the behavior of adults who survived. And I was, as many other children, possibly some of you, the recipient of their care. Those who've read the book will know that it is dealing with many subjects: abandonment, loneliness, love and adultery, and also, unfortunately, the hatred which came with war. It also deals with anti-Semitism and betrayal, and there's a murder as well as a trial, but also true friendship and heroism, and finally, adventure and excitement. It is the unveiling of the self-portrait of a lost child through my eyes, with the intention of understanding, or rather attempting to understand, those adults who experienced 5 years of horror beyond belief. I would hope that this book will bring alive an important historical period during World War II. This was actually possible after 15 years of personal psychoanalysis, thanks to the highly regarded Anne-Marie Sandler, who was a leading psychoanalyst. She sadly passed away 3 years ago at the age of 92, and I believe I might have been her last patient. The book resulted in an extraordinary childhood. For over a year after it was finished, I even resisted reading the book, but did so recently, and I was rather exhausted by the amount of events which took place in my young life. No one can escape their childhood, and we all have a story to tell. Finally, our childhood creates the individuals we are today, and the parents we became or will become, and the children we create. Natalie will now take charge of a few questions, and which have been emailed, and then we will have to the audience to ask her questions. And maybe some of the people in France will not have forgotten that 7:30 in England is 8:30 in France. Natalie, over to you.
Okay, so I've had quite a few questions, as I say, emailed to me. I'll try and put them in a logical order. Please don't wait till I finish asking these. If there's questions that come to your mind, please put them in the chat function, and I'm happy to read those out. Or, as I say, unmute yourself and just butt in and just ask. So it's probably the most obvious one to start with is, why did you call the book The Missing Baluster?
The reason for this is that when I was 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 3, 4, 5-year-old, I would go up the stairs of the escalier de service, which is where the people serving the flats would go. And I would go there because René and Joseph were the chef and the maid were also, I would consider them my grandparents, the people who would look after me when my mother wasn't there. And I would climb those stairs, and they were very steep. And you will see from the picture that there is a missing baluster. And on the right side, there were windows which were broken. So when I would climb the stairs, I would be scared I would climb up on my fours and would be terribly scared, because on the one side, it was the center of the emptiness of the staircase, and the other side was open yard. So I would be frightened, I would fall in between them. But I kept going because I wanted to go there. And whilst it was very difficult to find the right name for this book, it showed the perseverance when things are tough, that you can keep going. And I think that's possibly, and one of the things which I've been thinking, the harder the tools which you have when you're a child, then the more prepared you are to life.
Thank you. That leads me on to another question, actually. Somebody had asked what advice you would give to a young person entering business. And I know from what you've told you, it wasn't you did go to business school, you didn't do those things. Your career now is probably a reflection of what you've experienced through your life. So what advice would you give to somebody else, maybe wanting to achieve what you've achieved, but hasn't had that adversity?
Get advice. Try to get someone you can trust, and someone who's going to help you. And as a youngster, that's the one thing which you can be given. And I would tell you that when I got the job through Albert Goldenberg, who gave me that opportunity, which was, he was actually repaying a debt to my father of his life, and it's in the book. And I was probably the least qualified to get a job in England or in the United Kingdom. And I still got a job, and I learned everything. And then a few years later, I became director of the company, of the group, and then bought the business through a buyout. So to that youngster, ask, try to get advice, learn as much as you can, and work very hard. And I think that is all.
Yeah.
Work very hard. But there are two charities which which I'm hopeful to work with, and I'm working with. Of course, is the Winchester Project, which the library is working with, which is helping young people to develop, especially when they've had major problems. The second charity, which is also helping young people, is called Founders for School. And this, I am in discussion with them as well for mentoring youngsters. But for those youngsters, sometimes the help can be a grandfather, can be a grandmother, can be an uncle, can be a friend, and go and talk to them. Say, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm lost. Be open. These are the kind of thing. Help me. Mm-hmm. Now, I must tell you, when I was in France, I was alone in Paris. I was 16 or 17, and I was alone. Very few people were listening to me when I said, "Can I have help?" On the other hand, I will always remember there was the concierge of the local cinema who shared his food with me and provided me a floor to sleep on. I had a family in Paris, by my father's family, but I was ignored. So don't let yourself be ignored. How about that? That's a good example.
And you mentioned your father just there, and obviously he plays a big part in the kind of early stages of your book. How do you know so much about your father when he died when you were so young?
Well, first of all, I remember quite a long time ago when I met your mother, I was mistakenly saying it was a good thing that my father died when I was young, which is completely stupid, by the way, but that's what I said. That's what I believed in. But I'll explain that. The fact that my father died when I was very young and I did not really know him directly or remembered him directly, I made sure I was surrounded myself with plenty of people who had known him. And therefore, I was asking them about my father. And in Rue des Rosiers, which is the old Jewish quarter, my name, I was not known as Patrice. I was known as Raoul's son. So I was very, very proud of that. And then I wanted to know much more about my father, but I didn't dare calling my father's family because I thought, no, because they're going to think I need something from them. And it was only about 15 years ago, I think, or 20 years ago, something like this, that I decided to invite, and found them through Patricia, and found my father's family. I invited all of them to the Bristol Hotel and to a reception. And I said to them, bring me as much information, as much pictures and etc. of my father. And they did. And effectively, I was able to actually get in touch with them when I could actually show to them that I did not need them. Because when I needed them, they were not there. And therefore, later on, in fact, when I was in Paris, I was looking in the telephone boxes where there was the button, and I could see various Saiman, and I took off the numbers, but I never dared calling because I didn't dare calling them, and I was possibly ashamed of this, or whatever it was. So I could only call them when I did not need them.
And in relation to that, another question. Obviously, a lot of those people have read the book now. Would you have shown this book to your mother had she still been alive, and your father?
Well, if it was to my father, the answer was absolutely yes. But of course, the whole story, if I'd been able to show it to my father, would probably be very different.
Not happening.
And probably wouldn't be happening. Or maybe I would have been so critical of him and maybe if he had lived, he may not have been as much of a hero as he is in my view, because he was not able to prove to me that he was not a hero. Sometimes as a father, you're a hero with your children until they are 7 or 8, and after that you are less of a hero. I don't know. You tell me about that. Am I your hero?
What did you? Lots of people talk about writing their story, don't they? You hear that a lot. They'll write a book one day, or people suggest that. What did you want to achieve by writing the book? What made you actually end up doing it?
Well, I first of all, it was Anne-Marie Sandler, my psychoanalyst, who had suggested that I would write a book. And it was probably the first thing she must have had in mind was that, yes, it was an interesting story. And two, it was probably a continuation of my psychoanalysis, or maybe a closing of my psychoanalysis. So that was that. And two, as I'm writing at the moment notes on my on the second book, on the follow-up, it's quite fascinating to go back in the past, and you learn much more about. I think it's possibly an essay on my life. Do I understand myself today? I probably do, as much as I will ever.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So many questions. I'm just trying to put them in some kind of order. If anybody's got any others, just butt in with those. And what's your favourite part of the book?
There are some funny parts and sad parts. Very difficult. I looked at it, and I don't think it is so involved that I would say the funny way was my mother's funeral, funny enough, where the episode in the cemetery was quite funny. The sad part was probably the part where after I had finished with Anne-Marie, she had retired, and she said to me that there is no, whenever I want to have a chat with her, we'll do that. And so for a few sessions, I sent her an email or called her, or are you free next week? And then that was that. And then one day I was in the south of France, and I thought, well, I'll send an email to Anne-Marie. Any chance that we can meet next week? And that was on a Sunday. And then on a Monday, I received an email from her secretary that she had passed away. Yes, but I think that the thing which I've learned much in writing it is that the difficulties which you have at an early age is not something I would recommend to, I would have recommended to you, Sophie, and to Ollie, as my children. But of course, it prepared me to quite a lot of things, like coming from a Jewish father to with a Catholic mother, and not really being accepted by the Jewish community, nor by the Catholic community. It made me a chameleon, so I can be in the Arab world and I can be whatever you want me to be.
I suppose that answers one of the questions, which was, how did your childhood affect your adult life, both positively and negatively? And I think what I'm hearing from you there is that all that adversity also meant positively that you could
Absolutely.
you could adapt.
Absolutely, and adversity is failures, failures or defeat. And I talked to Hattie, your daughter, that being beaten is a good thing, and because then you're playing against other people who are better than you. Yeah, so you want to be better, so you go for it. Winning is quite easy. But being beaten, you learn quite a lot.
Natalie, do you mind if I just...
Yes, Anthony.
I'm very conscious that a number of people on this call will know quite a bit about your background, Patrice, and some have read the book, and there will be other people who know nothing about it whatsoever. And I thought, just to set some kind of context, would it be possible for you to say something, because you've emphasized the fact that you were brought up in post-war Paris, say something about what your parents were doing during the war, because I think that would add quite a bit of flavor to what's going on.
Yes.
Subsequent life.
My father was born in Algiers in 1900, and Jewish family. My mother was born in 1922 in Paris, or in Deauville, and was pregnant quite early with Norma from her husband, from her boyfriend at the time. And at that time, she had Norma during the war. The boyfriend had gone, and my mother, at the age of 22, pregnant woman in Paris during the war, alone, decided to steal an apple in a market, and a German officer was behind her and stopped her from doing it. And at that time, stealing food was quite a thing to do. Anyway, the German commandant took pity on my mother. Not only took pity, but took her back to Paris, and they started having an affair. And she lived together with the commandant during the war. This, of course, meant that when the commandant and the German had to leave, my mother was then left alone. And by that time, Norma was born, and she, of course, knew that she would be arrested for having collaborated with Germans. And at that time, women who were living with Germans during the war were not looked at it in a positive way. she knew she'd be arrested. She knew she'd be her hair would be shaved and transported in the street because they were considered as whores to the French population. My father was in the army, was made prisoner, and he was together with General Leclerc, also a prisoner in the same camp, and managed to escape. He escaped via Brazil and then Mexico, where he joined a girlfriend he had who had helped him financially to escape from the German camp, and rejoined General de Gaulle in London. And it was at the time when the Allied forces were going to help the French forces in Algeria, in France, but Algeria was French control at the time under French government. So my father was then sent to Algiers and rejoined General Leclerc, and then did the Toulon débarquement, and then the deuxième DB, deuxième division blindée, which then were the first division, French division, which freed Paris. My father then, who was a lawyer before the war, of course, had lost everything, had lost his wife. His wife had been together with his daughter, Danielle, spent the rest of the war in Berck with René and Joseph, who were the chauffeur and the maid. And my father's wife was then killed by one of the passeurs who was helping Jews to move to Western France, which was not occupied. Danielle was 16, 17, and came back to Paris after the war. My father was 45 after the war, and they lived back to his flat. And he was then at that time, because he had been close to General de Gaulle and General Leclerc, he had a privileged position in government, not being a minister, but a lawyer for the government, but as a war hero with Médaille de Guerre and the Légion d'honneur, and etc. So he was coming back to be quite powerful in France. He then had various girlfriends, and Danielle, who was 17, was hoping to be able to look after her father, but then then my father had girlfriends of 22, 23, on which there were two women who one of them was pregnant, and the other one met my father because she had married Norma's father, who then left again. And my mother had lost the guardianship of Norma, and Norma was handed over to the parents of the boyfriend, stroke husband. My mother wanted to get back Norma, and asked someone if they knew of a lawyer, and then they introduced her to my father, who said, "Okay, come over. We have a drink together, and then we'll talk." They had a drink at Albert Goldlander in Rue des Rosiers, a restaurant. And then after that, my father suggested that they go to another restaurant, and to take my mother in his car. And two things happened. The first thing is that the car broke down, and that was the bad news. But the good news, it broke down outside his flat. So they never went to the restaurant, and 9 months later, I was born. And then they got married, and that was that. But he died 4 years later. So That's
from anyone reading the book, I think, so just interrupt, I think anyone reading the book, there's so many people, so much influence in your life and so many stories.
yes.
Who do you think would be the most influential person in that?
The most influential person. To me, the most influential person, in an extremely strange way, has been my father.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was searching for people to help, and I was listening a hell of a lot. Although I'm talking a lot tonight, purpose of this, but I was listening a lot, and listening has helped me so much in my life. But I would say the people who have helped me, and I remember that, stage from René and Joseph, who were also talking to me about my father because they'd known him for 30 years before I was born. There was Albert, who knew my father extremely well, and remained faithful to my father and helped me to get my first job. Then I would say Jean Lemberger, who was a director in charge, who had been called by Albert and Simon to help me. Martin Shaw, who was the managing director at the time. And then what I was able to do is look at the mistakes my mother were making, and knowing in business-wise she was making mistakes. But then after that, also looking at millionaires I had known who were owning businesses and failing. And I think the question of those people were born with riches and they spent all of it. Family, the Ginsberg and the Golodets. I remember Mark at the time telling me in Fifth Avenue, New York, said, I don't know how we blew $250 million in 10 years, but we did. And I couldn't believe that people could do that. And then I've met others since. So listening a hell of a lot. But my father is probably my mother, was she an influence? She obviously was an influence. But difficult to say. Maybe things which I should not do as a parent. that's what the influence.
We've got a few questions that have just come in on the chat. So one of them relevant to what you were saying. Having run a hotel with your mother, would you ever be tempted to run a hotel? You've seen her mistakes. Would you do it better?
Through hard work. And no way. I can see how hard work is. And I would say that you would need to be you're going to be a professional to run a business like that. My mother was not a professional. So I would say that I would not want to run a restaurant or a hotel, but I would say that if I was wanting to do that, then I would really learn before I even owned the bloody thing.
With your steel?
I know after 52 years that of the business in steel, which I am, I think I've seen whatever best I can get out of people and the worst out of people. I probably have met the whole canopy of utter crooks to fantastic people.
And a few more questions here. What would be your proudest moment in your life, your happiest, and your saddest. Proudest, happiest, and saddest.
Proudest, my family. Then,
Yes.
proudest, my family. It's simple as that. My children and now grandchildren. They are on the way. I'm on the way to be proud of them.
And happiest and saddest?
Happiest, I think, altogether, when I met your wife and got married. Your wife? Did I say your wife? No.
You mean your own wife?
My own wife. I got married. I guess it was it was something which I never regretted. So it's been probably the happiest. But I would say that the happiness is really now where you start knowing yourself, and you can possibly relax a bit. And the saddest. I wish my father was alive.
Mm.
Yes. Next.
Yeah. Next one. Right, we've got lots of random ones. Okay. After your brain hemorrhage, you went into depression and then therapy for 15 years. How do you reflect on?
How do I what?
Reflect on this today.
The most fantastic experience, the hardest experience I've ever had in my life, and I would not be who I am today if I had not had these 15 years with Anne-Marie.
There was another question that said, what actually saved you? And is that the same answer?
Yes.
Yeah. Preferred as a childhood, given the choice?
The what?
What would you have preferred as a childhood, given the choice?
A father, a mother, a couple who would have been together and looked after me, and I would have been able to be potentially an actor, a normal life. Yes, possibly that. Possibly the kind of things which maybe I wanted for you, Sophie, and Ollie.
Mm. Getting the basic stuff right.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, this is a good one. You decided to leave the boarding school at 16 and lived in Paris on your own with no support. You left school without any qualifications and went to Bristol.
Uh-huh.
As an adult, how would you describe those actions? That's a good question, whoever wrote that one.
The most foolish and disturbing thing I could have ever done. Now, it was, yes, definitely the most stupid thing I could have ever done. And the fact, I would say that I was allowed to do these things was crazy from my mother's viewpoint. A bit less crazy for me because obviously I was stupid about it. And no one was able to tell me, don't be so stupid, don't do it.
And if they had, the outcome would be different anyway.
Then I was lucky. Then I think in many ways, having plunged in the deep end, which was mad, turned out to be lucky.
Mhm.
But I would not, this is not a recommendation for anybody.
And a couple more, and then we'll probably bring it to a close. Your period in the army was quite traumatic.
Yes.
Can you expand on this?
The saddest, when you were asking me about the saddest time, I would say that was an extremely sad time, probably the saddest time I felt in prison. And in fact, this would be the kind of thing which yes, it would be the saddest time of my life, being in the army. And I had to get out. There was no question about it, by whatever mean. And yes, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Quite traumatic. It's in the book anyway, but yes, it was probably, with depression much later on, the most traumatic part of my life.
Yeah. Okay. And a little bit about, where from now. Will you write another book?
Yes, I am at the moment taking notes. How long will it take me? I don't know. Probably a couple of years, probably 3 years. I'm also having an interest in possibly a translation in French of the book. I am also interested in a potential script for a series. Somebody has told me about it. That it might be interesting. All these things are projects. And when you try many projects, you don't know whether they're going to go there, but just interesting in the idea of a project. I never thought that I'd be writing a book, incidentally. So outside the business, and then involved in arbitration and mediation and writing this, so I'm keeping busy. And it's interesting.
Mm.
And interesting life as a grandfather, as a father, and seeing my children sort of struggling from time to time with their children. And I think it's lovely because it's my time to look at, time to look at how they handle things.
Yeah.
And you're handling it very well, all of you.
And another question just on how people can buy the book. I'm just going to stick another slide up. This should have the details on it. Yes, people should be able to see that. So there's different ways if people want to get the book. So they can email you, can't they? Or text. The price is $12.99 plus postage, but if it's local, they can pick up.
That's correct.
And collect. So that's Belsize Park, kind of North London area. But if you do want it posted, if you just give those details there, your name, delivery address, copies, and also whether you want a signed copy or not. And we're also posting quite regularly on Facebook, just at the Missing Baluster, if people want to check that out on the social.
Yeah, that's exactly that. We don't sell to via Amazon, because by the time we'd sold to Amazon, through Amazon, out of £12.99, 80p are remaining for me. And I decided it's much better to give money to charity than giving it to Amazon, which does not need my charity.
Is there anything, I'm looking at, there seem to be any more questions coming up?
I would say, I had something in my mind, which I think is quite important. But hold on a second, I don't get to my papers. Whoops. Yes, there is something which I'd like to finally say about it, which probably is is very important for me anyway. Through the Missing Baluster, we've been able to provide some donations to a couple of charities dealing with helping teenagers. And one is, of course, the Winchester Project, which Anthony Isaacs, who is chairing the Friends of the library, Belsize Library, and also Founders for Schools. And outside, of course, the donation which we're giving to the National Brain Appeal, which is a charity from of the National Hospital, which where I was hospitalized 20 years ago. Altogether, we've given about a few £1,000s, which have been raised, and I look forward to supporting those charities starting in January, and hopefully we'll be able to visit the Winchester Project and also have a meeting with Founders for Schools. The concept of this is mentoring young people. And for the time being, here's my message. To young men or women who may feel a bit lost, why don't you have a chat with a parent or a grandparent or a trusted friend? Or have a look at my story. And you may find I was that young person. And a difficult time is a very powerful tool to succeed. And to parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts who see that young man or young woman in trouble, that don't hesitate to help them. You can start, in fact, by buying my book and give it as a Christmas present. But joking apart, I will remember that when I was 17 or 18, I was alone in Paris. And members of my family who were in Paris ignored me completely. But I do remember that a stranger who was quite poor, because he was a concierge of the cinema, shared his food with me and allowed me to sleep on his floor. Now you can imagine how I remember that, and I would say that to these parents and grandparents who know that there is somebody like that somewhere, well, don't ignore them. Just how you're going to do it, I don't know, but do something. Don't let them alone. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. That's a lovely note to end on.
Careful.
Is there anything before we finish from you, Daddy or Anthony?
Anthony? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd just say a few words in conclusion, unless there's anybody else wants to come in at this point. Any other questions or?
No, I don't think there's any more.
Right. So, well, really just to thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Patrice, for helping to bring your book so vividly to light for us. And thank you also for the generous donation which you've already made. And as mentioned, if you buy a copy of the book, and the details are still there on Natalie's screen, so do make a note of the email address or the text number for the phone. You can buy them for £12.99, and £3 will be donated to the library out of the £12.99. So we're very grateful again to you, Patrice, for offering that. So thank you very much. I'd just like to say, I suppose in conclusion, that, you know, I think, I believe some of the people on the call are from France and Paris and will know this very well, but I think it's difficult to get an appreciation of what led up to the time when you were born without some understanding of the occupation of Paris and what happened there during the war and how life became so fractured. So I would like to put in a word, if I might, and particularly because of your father's role, for the Museum of the Liberation of Paris, which was reopened in very nice new premises in 2019, which is dedicated to the memory of Jean Moulin, who was one of the major resistance leaders. And General Leclerc, with whom your father fought and entered Paris, and to whom I believe in the book there's a rather nice letter of commendation from the general to your father for his service. So that gives some sort of background to what he was doing there. But I do think that atmosphere in Paris lingered on for quite some while. I mean, I can remember being there in the 1950s and being struck by the numbers of people who were wounded in the war, the amount of poverty, the begging and so on, quite unlike London at the time, where of course occupation hadn't been experienced and war hadn't been experienced in the same way, despite the Battle of Britain and so on. It was never occupied. And so I think all that is very important contextual background. So having said my 2 penneth, again, thank you very much. And if you wish to donate to the library separately, I left the email, the link, sorry, the link in the chat to have a look at that. And I hope you enjoyed this evening, and that you have a very pleasant holiday period, given the circumstances, at least as pleasant as they could possibly be, given what we've been going through. Also, please note that our next event is on Thursday, the 17th of January, when Colin Pinney, who is a well-known actor from our neighbourhood and a frequent contributor to our series at the library, will be presenting his talk on Alice in Wonderland, newly illustrated. So do come to that. And in the meantime, keep well and good night. Thank you.
Yes, children can't take a spoon in their mouth, like literally babies. You squirt into the back of their throats.
But yeah,
literally.
you can't get the spoon.
Yeah.
It will hurt.
Well, they really know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So you squirt.
Ah, Chantal, je te voyais pas. Joël non plus, je voyais personne. Patricia, Marie-Thérèse non plus.